Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Everything Design Show. I'm Nicholas, and today on the show I have Joseph. Joseph is currently a experienced designer at the NTUC Income Digital Transformation Office, right? And Joseph has been a design educator. He's a designer, entrepreneur, and he's really been working, in across different companies over the years, and he's also been teaching in our local schools, in our polytechnics, Nanyang Polytechnic, as well as ITE, and he's also a mentor and a coach for young designers. So we're very happy to have him today. Hi Joseph, how are you?
Hi everyone. Hi Nicholas. Great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me onto the show.
No, yeah.
Excited to share my story, man.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, actually, I saw Joseph's profile on LinkedIn. I think actually I connected with him on LinkedIn. I would say maybe at least a good year or a year and a half ago, and
Right.
I've always been trying to sort of see what cool things it is he's been doing. Previously he was at DBS, and he was helping in terms of a lot of the internal sort of design and experiences that he's been creating, which we'll hear about very soon. And also when he moved to NTUC Income, I also piqued my interest, to be honest, because in this room that I am at, right, on my left hand side on most days is my wife, who also works for NTUC Income.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
In the different office, she's looking at data in the data, so she works actually a bit closely, right? But yeah, when I saw the NTUC Income, I was like, oh, okay, cool, that's where my wife works. So yeah. Shout out to my wife. But anyway, so yeah, Joseph, enough of me babbling on. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? What are you
Sure,
doing
man.
now? What have you been doing for the past few years? And you maybe can let us know a little bit about, describe yourself as a designer, to be honest. Yeah.
Sure, man. Thank you so much again. So for me, currently now I'm working as an experienced design manager at NTUC Income, basically helping the business, because NTUC itself is an insurance company, is one of the only social co-ops insurance company in Singapore. And basically they are trying to provide insurance for the unserved and underserved markets and communities in Singapore. And part of this journey as well is really for them going on this digital transformation, right? So that's why the whole DTO, or the Digital Transformation Office, is set up. And primarily for them is trying to innovate and release new digital products for the customers. And so part of my job as an experienced design manager is really helping to look at experience design part of it, looking at really at these new products that we're launching, really answering the needs of the consumers or the customers. In terms of whole overall experience, from the website, EDMs, to the actual app, to the actual product offering, to the wording, and that, is it really talking into answering the pain points of the customers? Is it making it easy, intuitive for the customer to understand the policies and products? And also, more importantly, is it integrating to their lifestyle, into their day-to-day behavior, where insurance is not a very big buzzy thing, or like things that is too scary to go and look at, but something that is really integrated on the day-to-day basis of their life. So before that, I was at DBS as an employee journey design coach, looking at the internal transformation projects and initiative, looking at helping the bank to, because back then they had this ambition to be, they still have this ambition. Back then when I first joined in 2017, they had this vision of being a startup, a 27,000 or 22,000 startup. Basically every employee in the bank is going to be kind of act like a startup, because the competition for DBS is not the other banks. They don't view it like that. They see the new competitors for them is to be the big tech companies. So in DBS, internally they have this thing called Gandalf. We want to be the D in Gandalf, where G stands for Google, A, Amazon, N, Netflix, D, DBS, A, Alibaba, L, LinkedIn, F, Facebook. So in a way, they want to become like a big tech company. And how do they help to transform? And so there's a lot of different initiatives in my team, under the Future of Work department. looks up at some of this initiative as well. So for me as a design coach is to help the business people, the data folks, the day-to-day operations guys to kind of innovate, like working as a team to push out new transformation projects. And previously, before that, I was educator. I was teaching at Niam Poly for 3 years, started a design center there. Basically, if you go to any of the design schools in Singapore, there is a design center of sort. So in MP, I kind of helped co-found a design center called ETC Lab, basically looking at social projects and doing design research. But really it's about taking the learnings from our students from the classroom and bringing it outside, getting them to interface with real life clients, real projects, and also take the learning outside so they can see it in more practical sense rather than just theoretical. And before that, I was a retail designer, doing point of sales displays for a company called Barrows. It's a South African design company, designed for big brands that you may know of, like Heineken, Tiger, Cadbury, Panadol, all the big brands from Unilever, P&G, etc., all these big consumer brands. And prior before that, I had a short stint running my own design business for about 6 months, but I've lost a lot of money in that whole experience, which is interesting. It actually helped along with my other careers, my future careers, which made me kind of attractive, interesting story to tell for my employers. Yeah. And before that, my background is in industrial design. I studied in NYP, Nanyang Poly, for my diploma. Then after that, I went to UNSW, University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia, under Golden Jubilee Scholarship. I studied for 2 years, then I came back. Then I started my own studio, and my journey is ever since that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very, very extensive and very wide portfolio, to be very honest. If I tell you mine is just go to school and work in a school. That's it. So mine quite boring as compared to yours. But I mean, that's I think that's I mean, when you mentioned about you're running your own business for 6 months,
Yes.
I thought that was an interesting thing that you brought up. Employers also see that as a and you mentioned just now that the employers sort of see that as an interesting point.
Correct.
You're running your own business, you won't delve too much into that, right? But what do you feel was some of the things that you learned, or things that you can really take out from that was valuable for your career and where you are today?
I think one thing that I really learned is because to kind of network and be open and communicate and storytell and pitch and all that. Because for me, my personality, I'm an introvert. So when you run your own business and you need to make sales and you need to sell things, or you need to get money coming in on new projects and all that, you really need to kind of market yourself, sell yourself, speak up to other potential clients and all that, and kind of pitch that for new projects and all. And that's very difficult. And that's something that is very uncomfortable for me. But I think back then when I first started, I really only had one client. But other than that, there's not other clients really. So in order to put food to the table, I have to force myself to kind of speak up, communicate. So I'll go to the networking event. My first few networking events I went to, because that's in my mentality, right? How to get new business, go to networking events where people are at. So when I go there, I would just stand in the corner, because being an introvert, you don't want to. You're very shy. You don't know what to say and all that. But slowly, as I observe people and how they, like some people are just very magical. They can just go into a group setting and they just interrupt for a while, and then they blend into the whole conversation already. So I was like, how did they do it? Then after observing for a while, then I decided to give it a try. And as I try more and more, I got more comfortable with it and became easier. I think that really helped me along the way as a designer, be it even as a junior designer, selling my idea or selling what I'm designing, my concepts to my design managers and to my peers, or even be as an educator, right? Standing in front of the class and teaching design, teaching the concepts, the theory, the examples, the case studies to students to get them engaged, or even as my role as a design coach at DBS, engaging with different stakeholders, especially for the senior management, to meet the managers, or even the everyday employee, right? How do you then communicate to them? Or even now my role as income, working with multiple stakeholders across the organization. So I think the whole communication piece, even though we learned it in school in terms of presentation and all that, but learning it in real life and actually forcing yourself to do it, network and communicate, and really know how to listen and understand, and then kind of have small talks and all that. That is a life skill that I was very surprised to learn, and I really credit a lot to that whole experience, even though it was quite a tough experience at my start of my career. But I think that's one of the major learning points that I got from it, and I think it really made me a better designer today.
Yeah, actually, I like the word that you use because I think people may sort of associate, right, a failed business with negativity, right? But I like that you use the word tough, right? And I think that's something that's very, very important, because I mean, even when I look at your portfolio, I look at the work where you've been, your resume in that sense. Actually, I wouldn't assume that you're an introvert, to be very honest.
I hear that quite often.
To be an employee journey design coach, to be a head of sort of a design experience design manager. I'm assuming that these tools that you use on your day to day, we talk about interviews, understanding your clients, even talking to your own colleagues. These are things that need a lot of communication to be done on a day-to-day basis, right? So yeah, I mean, I guess speaking about that, what from a day-to-day, do you have to communicate a lot, as a experienced designer manager now, experienced design manager, or as a employee journey design coach in the past? How much of your day-to-day is really about communicating and listening to people?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I think in terms of communication, especially now, I think it's much tougher. We because we can't meet people, our colleagues in person, and our team in person. So we have everything do virtually. But I think it doesn't really change much. We still communicate. We go on meetings. So we still have daily stand-ups with different stakeholders or different teams that we're working with, and then talking about projects and all that, understanding their needs, understanding their struggles, understanding the objective, what's their KPI, and being more listening and seeing how our role as a designer, we can help them in their job, and how can we support them, all the way to back in DBS. Kind of that's what I'm doing. So some days, every day is not going to be this. It's not the same. Some days I'll be interviewing our colleagues, and to be honest, this is all around. Of course, when we design the programs, it's all across the world. So it's for all our markets. So some days we'll be interviewing colleagues from India, another in China, Hong Kong, or Indonesia, and just asking them about what's the day-to-day problems, or a particular area that we are experimenting or we're trying to figure out, like in terms of meetings. And that's one of the major projects that I did in DBS. Answering their whole experience around that, and where can we help and where can we do better as a whole company to help them. So, and being that, if not all the way, it could be interacting with vendors, right? When we design new products out, sometimes we don't have to do we're not involved in the coding process. We are involved in the research, the discovery, and the design process. But when it comes to deliver, sometimes we don't have the capability. Then when we interact with vendors, we need to articulate to them what is the specs, what's the requirement, what's the business objective, what's the design objective, and all that, and how. Yeah, so you kind of like use this skill of communication in every single aspect, from your day-to-day small talks with your colleagues, to your team, all the way to interviewing your actual users and interacting with your other stakeholders like your vendors, to the management. The management is a bit harder, and that's something that I'm still learning. Speaking in their language of business, and how do you show data and kind of talk in their language of business management terms and all that, and how do they help them achieve the company KPI and how the company's bottom line and all that. That is something that is quite new for a design to kind of learn and communicate. But it's a learning process. It's really a learning process. So every aspect, I think communication, skills, good communication skills is very important.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to dwell too much on the communication because there's a lot.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot for
so
you
much
to
we can go
share
about.
about. But actually, I mean, you talk about this communication part, especially when it comes to things like vendors, right? I can assume, or even you talk about your C-suite, the CEOs or the managers, people of, who are making all these very very big decisions. I realize
Yeah.
that in design school we teach that, like you mentioned, you teach that in presentations and things, but
Right.
but the skill is actually not just about presenting your ideas. It's about presenting in a language that they can understand, and they affirm, they are able to understand what you're trying to say, and
Correct.
it also is music to their ears in that sense, right? What is their KPI? What's the value to them? What are they trying to achieve?
Correct.
I feel, and I think to be very honest, this is a very 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 useful skill, which I think sometimes employers also don't acknowledge when they're looking for somebody to hire. A lot of the technical skills, or whether you can code, or whether you can do the reports,
Correct.
or your design and
Correct.
all these kind of things. But when it starts to reach, I feel when it starts to reach that maybe that managerial level or middle management, this is a very very tough skill to also identify in a future employer, or employee in that sense, right? So
Correct.
I mean, from your experience, you've had sort of two sort of key roles in using this communication skill, and
Yep.
also in your previous experience, with your business. Do you think that do you have any tips for people who have these skills, of communication? How would you sort of, are there any tips, or how would you recommend them, any recommendations for them to say, hey, here's how you can showcase these specific, people communication skills that you may have? Do you think that's something that you can share?
Yeah, I that's a good one. So I think I'm thinking of it as different aspect of a designer's journey or maybe a hiring journey. So on let's say if the designer is in the job search process and they're going to interviews. Interviews is a great way to showcase the communication skills as you are communicating and chatting and having a discussion with the hiring manager. From that in a sense, the hiring manager also can get a sense of what's the level of this person's communication skill. Are they able to do a bit of small talk? Are they able to intertwine subject matter coming in? Are they able to tell a story? Is there a logical flow to it? So that is one example of it. The other part, which is a bit tougher, is really putting yourself out there. So like even going to something like a podcast like that with Nicholas, that itself is also a communication skill, right? You're communicating is just a different platform, a medium. Or when I see designers that are putting themselves out there on YouTube, that itself is huge. Or even on LinkedIn, that is huge as well. And that's sometimes very underrated. And sometimes that's the ultimate leverage actually, where we leverage on this such platforms and this using technology and really putting ourselves out there. Because to be honest, 90% of designers won't really do something like that because most of us are maybe more shy, introvert. But having that courage and knowing that the first few tries of communicating, because even for my interviews, when I went for the interviews, like my first few interviews, like I was very, very shy. I was very, very awkward and don't know how to present myself, all that. But when after I reframe it and kind of see, for every interview actually is not a confrontation. Sometimes people feel like an interview is like a confrontation, but then suddenly I reframe it into more. How about I treat it into a conversation where I'm just chatting with another human being. The hiring manager is a human being. I'm a human being. We're just having a conversation. They are kind of assessing whether I'm good fit for them. I'm also assessing whether I'm good fit for them. So it took away the fear, and I think that the same kind of mindset I think can be applied into different areas. So talking to your managers on a day-to-day basis, talking to your peers on a day-to-day basis, catching up with them, having casual conversation. I think that itself is powerful. It's important. Even with your family members or your friends, just on a day-to-day basis, talking to people. I think that itself, it's good practice, and you just have to keep communicating more and more.
Yeah. Communication is very important. As a newly married man yourself, I will give you some advice as a person who's been married for how many years?
Yes. You
Almost
have to
3 years.
remember that.
I have to remember. Communication is key. Anything you is worth
Exactly.
worth communicating.
Yes.
But I mean, yeah. So I do agree. I think that I do think that this communication and yeah, putting yourself out there, because to be very honest, I mean, I'm not really putting myself out there for a job, but it's just to sort of showcase through the podcast or through the YouTube, to sort of, I guess, to grow the name of design. I mean, to me, to be honest, the
Yes.
reason why I started this whole podcast was really to say that design is bigger than what the general public perceive it to be, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the message that I'm trying to send across to everybody, and
That's cool.
and yeah, I'm also learning. Every day I'm trying to sort of improve myself, because I realize that when I watch my own videos, I realize that I'm like, I will say then I will stop. So I have to consciously, even sometimes when I realize that when I'm being I'm listening to you. My first few podcasts, you'll notice that I'll go, yeah.
Yes.
But I realize that
Yeah.
actually it's distracting to the listeners. So I try to keep myself, shut, in that sense. So I think, yeah, it's every day I'm learning a new communication or a new I guess a human
Awareness,
interaction.
right?
The human interaction, that awareness as well. I think that's a skill that we have to pick up. Do you think that there's any for young designers who you say, apart from just putting out your work out there, going to speak to more people, putting yourself maybe onto different platforms, are there things that they can do? Do you feel that they can do to really groom this awareness and this skill of communication? Do you think there's anything that that it can be done, especially for young designers, like maybe those fresh out of school or poly or uni or things like that?
Correct. That's a good question. So I think for me, I also got a lot of feedback. I think through my experience, both the past 3 months, I was like mentoring about 20 plus, 27 designers from all around the world, especially helping them through this situation that we are all in, advancing the career, developing career, or getting a job. And this is also one question they will ask, like, how do I position myself better to get a job or to move out in a career as well. So I think for me, what I kind of recommend to them in terms of this reflection is really to look back. So I actually had this 3 different tests that I kind of learned, a thought experiment that I learned from an online entrepreneur in America called Pat Flynn. He runs Smart Passive Income. So during this whole crisis, he gave one of his course for free, which is a business course. But part of the first few exercises that really got me, that I use it for in terms of my coaching with my younger designers or the designers, my mentees, is 3 tests. So the first one is called an airport test. All right. So imagine yourself in an airport, all right, maybe a Chinese airport or something, and in 5 years in the future. So this is like 2025, 5 years in the future. You are in the airport, and a best friend come along and said, "Hey, Nicholas, wow, 5 years. It's cool to meet you again. How's your life been?" And when you reply back to this person, you want to then share, 5 years into the future, how is your life awesome? And this could be in areas of your career, your love life, your family, your relationship, your money, etc. And then you start to note it down. Why is your life awesome in the 5 years? So first one is to look into the future. All right, project yourself in the future and where you want to be and what an awesome life would look like for you. Then the second test is a bit more difficult, where we want to look back, reflect back into our past. So it's called the history test in some sense, or I'll just call it the history test. So it's called the history test. And basically what it does is, it's something that I did unconsciously or consciously before I knew about this thing, is just looking back at my past careers or past important milestones of my life. And so be it in your career, new job, or schools or studies, or a role that you took up in a school or a CCA, and ask yourself, these 3 questions. First, what is 3 things I really enjoy about this? All right. As a designer in this particular company or this role, what are 3 things I really enjoy about this whole experience? right? If you're in school, in uni, what are 3 things I really enjoy? So when I ask my students during my coaching session, I don't ask them what are they best at, what are they good at, which subject are they good at. I don't ask them. I ask them, what do they enjoy? Then I ask them that. Then the next question to ask is, what are 3 things I do not enjoy about this whole experience or this moment or this memory? All right. And that itself will kind of highlight some key points about things that you want to avoid. So yeah. And then the last one is, to just sum it up, is what is your most favorite memory from this experience? Yeah. And so I can share one with you. Actually, I have in a notebook if you
Oh, okay.
open to share.
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you're okay to
Yeah, please, please, please. Yeah.
Yeah, just give me 1 sec. Yeah.
No.
So I have it here. Okay. So I'll maybe share the experience as a product designer at Barrows. When I first, it was kind of my official first job as a designer. Yeah, as a full-time designer. So what I really enjoyed about it was, I designed solutions for many different big name brands throughout my 2 years there. Learned a lot from how design works. How is it just more than art, but it's science. Second, I really like the overall company's culture there and the vibes every day. We have music blasting in the whole entire office, working with colleagues from all around the world. That's very exciting. I really enjoyed the ownership and autonomy it was given to us as designers to deliver solutions and presentation to clients, feel valued for my work there as a designer. So there's 3 things I really enjoyed about it. And 3 things I did not enjoy about it is not being able to interact with clients directly for briefing or to presentation, because sometimes I have to always work through a sales manager or sales director, so I don't really get to interact with the clients. So I kind of like that. I don't like that as much. Second one is politics. There are always, even a small company, there always going to be politics with different people. So that's something to kind of take note of. So yeah, I think that's common for every type of organization. Third one, I was fully focused in the design role itself, not able to teach or share, because previously, before I came to this role in Barrows, I was teaching at ITE and NYP, and I really like that. And I like that giving back, or that mentoring, or that teaching or sharing back with others. So in this role, I found it difficult and limited that I couldn't do it in this current role. That's something I didn't really enjoy, and I was feeling that I'm not living up to my full potential. So there's the 3 things that I did not enjoy about it. My most favorite memory was that it was my first and only overseas paid business trip that I went to South Africa after being awarded the best designer of the year there. So I got to work at our head office in Durban in South Africa. And every weekend we went for animal safari, and I got to work for big brands there again in Africa. So it's really fun, and I really got to learn about the overall business and met a lot of awesome people and colleagues over there as well. So then once you have done all this, you do a grading of A, B, or C, or D. So for this experience, I rated a C. So then over time, you want to do this for all your different milestones of your career. And once you have this map out already, then what you want to do is to kind of find the commonality. So like in design thinking, right, we have this empathy, the empathy stage. We go out, interview users and all that. We get all different insights. But after these interviews and these sessions of interviews, we will put the findings together and kind of emphasize them and gather them and categorize them. So that's the same thing you want to do. And you want to ask yourself, at the end of this whole reflection exercises, what are the 1 or 2 things that seems to motivate you most about the work that you do? So then things that you enjoy, you put them together and you start to see, is there a cluster? So for me, it came back to interaction, having to interact with people, to diversity of projects. I like to work with a lot of different kind of things, being valued as a designer, and then ownership and autonomy. That's something that I really desire. And then learning, to learn new stuff or to teach people as well. So yeah, so this is something that in terms of reflection that I did, and it kind of gives you a bit of more of awareness. And later when you're finding your next job or career, it gives you as a guiding post, or as like a principle that you kind of follow, and a framework to kind of find your next place. Yeah. The last test is that I learned from this whole thing is called a shark bait test. So the whole idea of this shark bait test is basically, if you imagine yourself being in Shark Tank, the TV show, right? And there is the sharks in the room there. And Kevin O'Leary, who is one of the sharks there, typically all the products that is being pitched to the sharks or the investors there are actually pretty much the same. But the key thing that really make them want to invest in someone is that someone. They don't really care too much about the products and all that, the business. They can make it, but who they're investing into it makes a lot of sense and makes is the decision factor. So that's why it's called the sharp big test. And it's kind of understanding what's your unfair advantage. And this is the tougher one. This one, what the test really got me to do, which I also did in the previous few other workshops here and there, is to ask maybe the 5 to 10 closest people to you, friends, family, and all that, about what is their impression of you. What do they feel like you're best known for? What is your best quality? What is your strengths? And you ask them that. Because sometimes for us, when we ask ourselves, we get an illusion of what we think we are good at. So, for example, for myself, when I first started out, I had always this impression that because I'm a designer, I'm a creative person. All right. So my unfair advantage is that I'm creative to all my friends and my families. But when I asked my friends and my colleagues and all, the thing that came back to me was not creativity. And creativity was one of the qualities, but it was like ranked third or fourth. The first one was passion. That they see me as someone who is very passionate about what I do. And then the second one is trust, where they found me to be someone who's trusting, who can really, they can share a lot of things about, and they feel like they can connect with. And knowing those two qualities, right, actually is one of the reason that gave me a lot of confidence to do a career switch or career change to become a lecturer, from a designer to become a lecturer at a young age, because I know that I can, as a lecturer, I want to share my passion with the students. I also want to be able to communicate and get them to feel that they can trust me, so that I can help them, teach them, and then have a communicate with them, interact with them. So that really got me thinking. So yeah, so that's the 3 tests that I learned from this whole thing, which is a bit of the reflection. And a lot of, I don't think design schools really do this, but I try to do it with my students. I try to get them to reflect back about the whole learning experience in uni or in poly, get them to kind of reflect, what are some things that they enjoy, what are some things they don't enjoy. And as slowly as they go through this self-awareness exercise with themselves and be honest with themselves, because this is themselves, they can't go wrong, right? Then they have more clarity about where they want to go next. Yeah, be it for the job they want to do, for the life they want to live, or the future they want to create.
Yeah, I mean, they can't be wrong, but they can sometimes be delusional, because I mean, because which your test actually does, because when I start asking other people what are the best qualities that they see, or the worst qualities that they see of me, I may think that I'm a very good person, right? Or I may think that my strengths are ABC, but it may turn out that what other people value in me is maybe DEF, right? Which I think, that's very useful, because I did actually, to be honest, I did ask a lot of my students who have been graduating for the past few years. I asked them very straightforward, which was, what are your strengths? But I realized that a lot of them didn't know what their strengths were. There were a few students, so those that were very confident, they knew what they wanted to do as a career. They knew that this was the path. So those students, we don't have to worry about. I didn't have to worry about, because I knew that.
Too much, like, you don't have to worry too much.
Yeah, I mean, don't worry too
I have
much.
students like that.
Yeah. So you're like, you should be fine. You should be fine. But there were those that were. Actually, I don't know how to do. Then, and now that I'm graduated, I try to ask also. So, but I think that's I think the way you describe it, and I think the questions that you ask, where you are in 5 years, the airport test, the shark bait test as well, about
the history test, looking back,
history test as well. These 3 different tests that you describe actually does get somebody to reflect on themselves, and I also really like the history test, especially when you talk about your experiences in the workplace or school. Correct. Or whatever, because you frame the questions quite differently, rather than ask yourself what you're good at, what you're bad at. Is being very simple in terms of talking about it in emotions. And I think in design we don't really like to. Emotion is something that's very hard to define as a KPI for a business. Correct. But I feel that even when I talked to one of my previous podcast guests, her name is Angela, so she's actually been looking at how design from a psychological level impacts design decisions, and I think emotions seem to come up quite a lot. Understanding yourself, how do you feel about this experience or that experience, and I think that's something that really I don't have the answer, but if we can figure out how we can let emotions be a viable KPI to measure. And I would imagine now with your work with NTUC Income,
Correct.
talking about the experience of customers, how they feel about things. I guess, good segue. So how do you, I mean, now within your job, especially when you're looking
Yes.
at the experiences of customers compared to your previous job where you actually were looking at it from an internal business perspective, right?
Correct.
How do you feel, or how do you think that collecting people's emotions, is there some way have you found a way to collect that in a manner in which the other people in the business also acknowledge, or do you think that you're still trying to figure that out for yourself?
Good question. So interesting. In terms of income, I'm about coming 3 months in, so I can't really comment too much. There's not much I can do. I can share a bit about the work that I did at DBS
Sure, yeah,
to give a bit more clarity in terms of how we do that. So one of the things that we did in DBS, one of my projects that I did was looking at how can we change the meeting culture at DBS. And I think the key thing for that was this whole journey started back in mid 2017, where Piyush, the CEO, and the senior leaders there, about 200 to 300 of them, met an offsite. And back then, they had this ambition to be the best bank in the world by 2020. And obviously, they hit that goal about 2 years earlier. They achieved it in 2018. But before that, they weren't at that goal already. So one of the kind of strategies in terms of reaching that was to be a 22,000 startup. And one of the things that they were discussing, what is the number one blocker that's really preventing us to be this startup or this journey or helping us there. And one of the points that the senior leaders brought up was this whole idea and this issue about meetings and how day to day the teams meet or the organization or the people met wasn't very effective. They didn't start on time. Meeting didn't start on time. There was no data being shared. It was all just people's intuition or people's experience and just gut feelings and all that. So there wasn't really a lot of data being shared in the meetings to make decisions. People don't speak up. It's only always the senior leaders that speaks up, or the most what you call the hippo, the highest paid person in the room that speaks up. There was meetings don't start on time, and then there's no clear summary at the end. So there was this problem and issue, and really meetings is like on a day-to-day basis. That's how people meet with each other, and in terms of culture, that's kind of part of a bigger culture and what we call the micro spectrum of what culture is, because that's how people interact with each other and how people behave with each other. So my boss back then, together with a couple of other colleagues, came together, was assigned by the CEO Piyush to go and solve this problem. So they did it. They came up with something called Meeting Mojo, which at DBS, Meeting Mojo stands for the two roles that plays in this role. So Mo stands for meeting owner, Joe stands for joyful observer. So the role of Mo needs to make sure that every meeting has what you call dates. D for data, make sure that every meeting has the data involved when we make decisions. A, have a clear agenda of what is going to be discussed in the meeting. T, timeliness, making sure that the meeting starts and ends on time. And E, equal share of voice, making sure that Mo has the role and responsibility to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak in the whole meeting. And then S, to summarize all the points that was talked about in the whole meeting. And then the other role that is Joe is called the joyful observer. And he or she is the one that was appointed by Mo to give feedback on how Mo ran the meeting. So at the end of the meeting, about 1 minute or 2 minutes, Joe has to give feedback on how Mo ran the meeting according to dates, DATES, on the data, the agenda, the timeliness, the equal share of voice, or the summarize. So for example, in this meeting with Nick, right? So for example, if Nick is the Mo, I would say, Nick, in this meeting, clearly you brought the data in. So we really had a lot of good discussion around the data that was presented. In terms of agenda, you had some clear real agenda, but unfortunately this meeting didn't start. We didn't start the meeting on time. We started late, and also we ended late as well, which actually affected the next meeting. Going to affect our next meeting. And in terms of equal share of voice, I noticed that Sarah didn't really speak up or wasn't given a chance to speak up. So I think in the next meeting we can involve more people to speak up and share our ideas. And then in the last one, you did summarize pretty well, so that's great. So if this direct feedback, immediately in the next meeting, you, Nicholas, as the Mo, will have an awareness in terms of where are your shortcomings or where can you improve, so that one meeting by one meeting, as a bank, as an organization, we can improve the overall culture. So that's how this whole thing started lah. And it's still ongoing now, even in this whole journey in DBS, even in 2020, about 3 years on, it's still ongoing. So we are, I think to date, through the different programs that we have launched with this meeting Mojo initiative, we helped the bank save about, in 2018, we helped the bank save about 320,000 hours, which
Wow.
you equate to one salary per 1 hour. Average salary is about $50, and it's about 22,000 staff. You multiply that, and 2 meetings average a day. That's about 10 million year-on-year savings already. In 2019, we increased that to about 540,000 hours, just because of the scale of people increasing and also the time saved. So this is productivity saving and effective saving. So people are still doing the day-to-day work and all that, but their time is well spent and time is given back to them to do more high-value stuff. So in terms of how we track it, imagine, because that's back to the earlier question in terms of emotion, how you track it. So for all these experiments and all that, in terms of how we get all this data is by running surveys, right? So at the start of when we launched this new initiative, so for example, for us, when we launch it in May of the year, we'll do a bank-wide survey. And in terms of this survey, we will ask very succinct questions that we will measure upon and answer it, and so that it's easy for our employees to answer. At the same time, we'll also measure in terms of their behavior, in terms of how they feel and what their emotions towards this experience. Then every month after that, we do a random sample across the whole bank, about a few thousand, about 3,000-4,000 of them. Then we get the feedbacks back. Then we measure it, and we see whether we improve in some areas or not improve in some areas. We report this finding back to the senior management, communicate with them. All right. Then in the end of the year, in October, we will do a bank-wide survey again to kind of see how much we improve or not improve. And luckily, we do improve with the constant engagement and with our employees. So this is through a survey mechanism and through very carefully crafted questions that we try multiple times to get people, employees to try it and give their feedback, whether this really target the thing that we want to target, and we measure according to that. Yeah. In terms of measuring emotion as a bank, that's how we do it. And that's something that was really prompted by our Chief Data Transformation Officer, Paul Coburn, who's our sponsor for this program. And we meet him on like a bi-weekly basis to kind of get his steer and feedback. And he's the one really that pushed us towards this new direction of being more data-driven and forcing us to really get some quantifiable results from all this good work that we have been doing in terms of culture and kind of measuring that. And then when we report back to the organization, to the senior management, they see the data. In terms of people's behavior, these are improving. And in terms of the day-to-day, they're also seeing it in real life. So they can then justify, it makes sense. And that's why there's this whole big push, and a lot more confidence given to them to kind of endorse it further, role model it, sponsor it further, support it further throughout the whole bank.
Yeah.
Even now, like 3 years on, it's still ongoing. Looking at different areas that we can improve.
So are you going to bring this to income?
Yeah, so I've shared with income. So we'll see. I think one thing that I learned coming to income is that every company has its own journey, its own digital transformation journey. So that DBS started its journey ever since like 2007, 2008, especially when Piyush jumped on board as the CEO. And that's ever since. That's like 13 years, 14 years kind of journey, very, very long. And then income itself recently started, maybe 3 years on, 4 years on, innovating. So it's a different stage. So sometimes what I've learned is, in terms of doing this transformation design work, is that sometimes the organization or employees or the management or the company itself is not ready yet for such a radical shift. And what we need to do is to start small. We start with small little projects. And that's how DBS actually started as well in this whole transformation. We start with one process improvement project that helps save millions of hours for our customers, boost the confidence of management and also the people that's involved. Then from that, then slowly evolve to more projects of such scale. Then as it grew, then the human-centered design or design thinking methodology kind of brought in to kind of improve that further. Then Agile is brought in, then data is brought in, then all this slowly grew and grew, eventually to what you see, what you guys see on the news today about what DBS is. So that itself is a very interesting learning point for me. So I think in income is starting on the right journey. So depending again, when is the readiness of this organization in terms of taking a more radical change. So sometimes some of this initiative is a bit too far-fetching, to a bit more scary for some people. So how can we do it in smaller chunks to slowly build up confidence with the management and also the whole company of such transformation journey? Yeah, because you want to transform people like that. Not everyone's like a Tony Robbins, where you can do it in one person and so sometimes you really need to pace it slowly. So income, they have the appetite. It's just when.
Yeah. Okay, I'll ask you the airport test in 2025 again. To see the achievements of your as an experienced designer, right?
Awesome.
But no, actually, I mean, you've communicated very clearly. I mean, this is such a good case study, and everybody should be listening about this particular case study. I mean, it's not a high tech, solution. It's not a very sexy solution in that sense, right? It's not something very designerly, aesthetically pleasing in that sense, but it's a process, and sometimes by changing a process through, your human-centered design, user experience design, or design thinking methodologies, techniques, very simple surveys, random sampling, or bank-wide, that already gives you. You're talking about millions of dollars of savings, and that hires so many more people in a year. You can, do all of these things with those resources. So I mean,
correct.
And also on a personal level, I imagine if I was, a Mo or a Joe, right? It correct. Gives the Joe. I see that it gives the Joe. A little bit more authority as well to say that, hey, and the Joe can be anybody, right? The Joe can be just an intern, or it can be an executive. It doesn't always have to be a person that's above the Mo or the hippo in that sense, right? So yeah, there's a lot of empowerment, with simple processes that are there, and I think the appetite that you're talking about, is very, very true. DBS definitely has much a bigger appetite, for the change, and also, it's both. It seems to come from top down and to a certain extent bottom up as well.
Exactly.
So that wow, very, very, very good example. I will take this and put it in my slides.
Right, because I'm more than happy to share with the slides and the case study as well. Because I think this case study has been shared on Harvard Business Review or some business magazines, or even a book coming up. So it's being shared as well. So it's quite cool. I think when we first did this, we didn't really expect much. But as we do, we went on this journey, because it's also a very radical thing. So it's also putting ourselves out there. But as we got traction, it started to build a platform for culture to change in the organization, and also more people want to chip in and more people want to contribute, and then now we're able to tackle even tougher stuff. So after like handling the foundational meeting behaviors kind of thing, and we got things to improve by a fair bit, then we went into the next one, which is deeper. It's like, how can we then create a psychological safety in organization? Google does it very well. They also do independent studies inside the organization to kind of improve their managers' effectiveness and their teamwork and all that. So DBS also is thinking on the same, like being inspired by such big tech companies. And we're looking in terms of, in psychological safety, how can we improve it? How can we increase it? How can we get people to not just say nice things to each other or like speak up, but how do we get people to disagree or have a discourse with each other? How do we get them to dissent with each other to kind of like, so that, is when you discuss and debate ideas with each other, that's where new ideas, new innovation comes about. So how can we do that? Because that in some way translate to new business value as well. Then I think this year, that's in 2019, this year we have a very heavy focus on feedback, and how can we create a feedback culture throughout the whole organization, where we are more appreciative of each other, we're more open with each other, and sharing where our strengths, our weaknesses, where we can improve. And we do that anonymously and also directly as well. So that's also a lot of initiative coming in from both HR. It's a partnership between HR and Transformation Group as well. So it starts with a small project, then eventually you start to grow and create a platform. So advice for like organizations out there is really to start small. Then eventually, as that build traction, then I think it's like a startup, right? When you do MVP, when you starts to be a bit more traction, then you start to scale. So I think it's same for any transformation program or initiative.
Yeah, I mean the thing that really struck me when you describe all these things, you know, I've of course I've read about, you know, what DBS has been doing. You know, they are really the post. I mean, DBS has been the design poster boy for Singapore for many
Yes.
years lah. You know, we went over
Correct.
to you know, see the presentations by Chowick and their design team and
Yep.
everybody.
Amazing stuff.
But I think this conversation that I'm having with you really opens that window and shows that even when you talk about being the Gandalf, right, the big tech
D in
company,
Gandalf.
right,
Yeah,
the D in Gandalf
exactly.
DBS, right, to be the Googles, to be the AliExpress or the Alibaba, you know, your what you're talking about here is actually embracing the human aspects of the world, right?
Correct.
And building on human empowerment, which is what I've learned from you so far, you know, in this conversation. And I think that's something that, you know, I think design or even tech, sometimes it's all about, you know, what is the technological advancement, what is the you know, what's the benefit, what's the cost, you know, how expensive is my technology, blah blah blah, so on and so forth. There's a lot of very quantifiable data points in that sense, but how do we translate or merge those very quantifiable data points within the tech world with the human aspects of that? I think that's something that I think a lot of organizations, I wouldn't just say businesses, but just organizations are struggling with. So it's very endearing to really hear that, you know, from a human aspect, DBS has been able to do that. And of course, you know, now, you know, with your journey with NTUC, that also seems to be starting to you know, to start as well, you know, at an early stage, but still, you know, still something that it's you know, it's on the journey, which is a good thing, I feel. Yeah, you know. So I guess the next question I wanted, because what you talked about is actually what I believe like is the bigger value of design, because you know, I think now in the industry there's a lot of people that's talking about UX UI, which is very useful. It's the market now. It's, you know, for you to be a UX designer, you know, to learn about all the user interface, you know, all the different tools that are there, the visual aspects of it. You know, these are a lot of the communication designers, graphic designers have evolved and moved into that particular field already. But I you know, just with this example that you shared, you know, I think that the value of design is bigger than just UX, you know. So I guess for my question to you is, you know, as a person who is, you know, define, I guess, yourself as an experienced designer or experienced design manager in that sense, do you feel that there is the I guess the market or the workforce, the people who are in the industry, do you sort of feel that that this label of an experienced designer is sometimes misunderstood as a UX designer, or do you think that the industry has a very clear separation between the two?
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's a terrific question, because even for as an academic, right, as a educator, or even a government, even for Design Singapore as the agency, right, or even for practitioners for like us, it's difficult to kind of put labels to things. And sometimes these labels also, everyone have a different interpretation to what it is, right? So even there is new things like service design and what does it really entails, you know, transformation design, what does it entails, or policy design or system design, you know, like, or even like user experience, what does it already mean? And I think for me, I just see it as design. It doesn't really matter too much and what labels we put. The labels that we put onto such things like UI design, okay, this is just interface design, user interface design, that is through the apps or the websites that we interact with, the digital things that we interact with. Those are the visual designs and stuff. So that's very clear. User experience then goes into broader in terms of the product or the app. What's the overall user experience of that one particular product? All right. Then once you go into customer experience or employee experience or experience design in general, then it looks done. Then you tend to look at the overall person's journey throughout this using this product, this service, and all that. When you look at service design, you just look at one particular service of how the customer interacts. So there are all these different labelings and bucket. I think it's useful in some extent, but end of the day, there's a common thread that runs around everything is about, which is design, and is how I define design is just a creative problem-solving process, a way for us to solve people's problem, to provide solutions to it. So doesn't really matter what is required, because even nowadays, for the big tech companies like Google and all, you start to notice that they don't have a very defined terms. And this is something I heard from the Google design manager as well, is that they slowly take away this whole UI UX thing already. They just call the designers product designers, and it becomes necessity, or it becomes given that this product designer needs to know both UI UX. Yeah, and the next thing they need to know is maybe a bit of coding or a bit of research and here and there. But it's a given that you need to do this. So there are companies that this role is still very clearly defined, where you are a UI designer, you are a UX designer, or UX researcher, and all that. But sometimes when we look at the big tech companies and maybe they have a wider foresight on things to come, they will see this grow merging. And I think you even when I've through the different coaching students that I've coached and stuff, all the younger designers, the feedback that I get from them through their different interviews with companies is that because of this current crisis and how budgets are shrinking as well, and maybe hiring freeze here and there, now companies are also asking a lot more from designers, where they don't just hire you for just one particular purpose and role. They expect maybe a bit more, whether you have graphic design, you have a bit of design research, at the end of the day, it becomes like just a product designer where you need to do kind of everything. And even my role at DBS is as a design coach. What does it entail? It entails anywhere from designing decks. So, you can got graphic design, you can call it copywriting, you can call it storytelling, whatever, to doing research, doing interviews and all that, designing experiments, actually going down, then designing EDMs, artifacts, banners, or doing presentation, or even being a mascot. So some of the things that we do, I also have to be the mascot, or I have to do a voiceover for the mascot. So all these are different roles. And if the designer comes into the industry or just have a single mindset, oh, I just want to do UI design, okay, you can. Nothing wrong with that. And there are some companies that really pay very well for such designer. But as the industry evolves, you also need to be prepared to take on new roles and responsibility, especially if you want to rise up in terms of your design career journey as well. So, and that's the reality. I think end of the day is about the problems that you're solving. If the problem itself you're solving is small, like a UI, particular button features and all that, then your earning potential, your growth potential is maybe also limited to some extent. But as you start to broaden your imagination, you broaden your scope to what a designer can do and what design is really, and you take on bigger problems, more complex, challenging problems that are more systematic or global scale, and that's where you start to pull in different toolkits, framework from being agile or being from business side or being from design or engineering. You start to bring everything in and you start to make a nice mess of it, and kind of solve that problem. So it doesn't really matter whether you're a designer per se, you just become a design contributor to that project. So that's a slow shift I'm seeing for how I'm kind of slowly seeing the new definition of what a designer is. Just basically a creative problem solver. So yeah, it doesn't really matter what is it. Because like for me, I didn't know UI UX, right, at DBS. When we are required to design, one day, after through our research and all that, one of the solutions was decided was that maybe we need an app to kind of help us to mitigate this Joe, help this. So we have the Meeting Mojo app. It's on the App Store. Basically, the insight that we got from our Joes through our interviews is that sometimes for the Joe, because they are junior, right, and it's very difficult for them to give feedback to the managers or the directors in the room. So what if we could design an app or a third-party thing that could speak up for this person, for this junior person? So we thought a timer app that will have audio bars if the meeting is going to end soon, instead of the person speaking up, and we just clear on fact. So we did that. And previously, I didn't know how to design an app. I have never designed an app before. But then I had just an open mindset. Okay, just go and do. So I just go on YouTube, learn, study all the other different apps, take best practices, then design an app, then go through testing and all that, and slowly improve it along the way. And once you have that type of mindset, it's a bit more open, you take on any type of challenge. I don't know. I see UI, UX, all very blurred. I just see it as design. Everything is design. Yeah. It's about solving a problem for a particular user or a group of user or something like that. Yeah.
I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying, because I mean when I first started out learning about design or UX, I think many even my masters was sort of helps me define myself as a design anthropologist per se, or the design ethnography. But and the more companies I see, there's now designers are also calling themselves multidisciplinary or transformational designers and things like that. So it's but when I look at the tools or the skills that people are using, is quite it's quite common, that you and I will use on a day-to-day basis, whether it's the research or the mapping exercises or the toolkits that are there, the way you're drawing from different schools of thought. But yeah, I do agree that we are essentially trying to be problem solvers, and I think you've shared very, very good examples of how we solve problems through a sort of creative mindset. I also like how you shared about the other skills that are not necessarily associated with designers, like communication and things like that, which I think is very valuable for us. So I guess to end off, I did want to ask you one thing. You talk about currently being a mentor. Even though in your workplace you're as an experienced designer, you're still mentoring a lot of students now. So if a student wanted to come and find you and maybe get some advice, do you have any advice for them, or how can they come and find you and connect with you?
Sure. So if you want to find me, you can look at me up on LinkedIn. Just search my name, Joseph Lewis Tan. I should pop up, or you Google me, you should find me as well. Yeah, I'm the only person who have that name thus far that I know of. So you can ask me for any advice there through that channel. If you want to have a call with me, you also can just DM me or message me. I'm more than happy to have a chat with you to help you along your journey, your way. In terms of advice that I would give to young designers is, I think one thing that I've really noticed, because I was also a hiring manager, I hired for designers as well, and nothing to put against designers coming from General Assembly or Hyper Island and all that, but generally a lot of these UI UX designers that comes in, they, even for design schools, to be honest, is that they will have a fixed set of portfolio. Correct. So they come in, they will see, the projects that you see. Sometimes I have 10 designs coming in from maybe GA or mix here and there, but then the projects I see is all the same. Who's the actual designer, I also do not know. But that is also very difficult for me as a hiring manager to go and decide how am I going to decide who to choose and who to hire. All right. So I think the smarter designers and the ones that are a bit willing to put a bit more extra work, what they would do is then they would do a bit more pro bono work. For example, let's say if you're hiring, you want your desired company, your dream company to work for is DBS, for example. And I've seen examples of this happening in DBS as well, for junior designers. What they would do is that they would, if the company I want to work for is DBS, and the role that I'm applying is for a product designer or for UI UX designer, the projects that I have maybe is not related to any finance and all that. What I could do is then maybe I look at the ecosystem of these things that they have, be it from their Payla app to the DigiBank, or just maybe a feature or a website or something like that, one product, one feature or what. And maybe I'll go about redesigning it or making it better. Actually, if you go to any design schools, even as a lecturer, when you ask me to we ask us to think of the new projects, it's either a new design or redesign. Correct? There's not too much variance in that. So a redesign, it's much simpler. So you see you do an audit of the existing product, where it can be improved. You go and do your interviews and all that. You ask for feedback, and you look at best cases, best apps that do it better. Then you go about redesigning. Then you explain your whole methodology and your whole process. Blog it on Medium or Substack or in your portfolio or in your website. Then you share it. And imagine now if as a hiring manager, when I got 10 people coming in for this interview, and out of that, one of them has a particular project that is related to my company or especially if bonus points, if it's related to my team that is actually designing that product, immediately out of this 10 people, who will stand out? Right? That one person that actually went above and beyond, right? Who did that even for free, but it's for his own learning or her own learning experience. But because of that relevance and that hard work and that, what I call is the give, then us, or the from Gary Vaynerchuk, like the jab, right hook kind of method approach, where you give first and don't expect anything in return. Because of that value given and that relevance, that person is more likely to stay on top of my mind in terms of when I'm making a hiring decision to who to hire or who to take forward to the next step. So that's something that I don't see a lot of designers doing, especially for junior designers. Especially this time is much more difficult to get a job. If you can take a strategy like that, and this has been happened quite a lot to different designers as well. Not a lot, but maybe a few designers who went above and beyond. They can manage to secure the dream job or the company that they want. So maybe the first thing to do is kind of list down what are your areas of interest, where you want to explore and hire. Is it e-commerce? Is it any apps? Is it Grab? Is it Carousel? I don't know. Whatever companies you want to go. Then look at their products, look at the ecosystem of what products and services or solutions that they have, and can you go about redesigning that, make it better, so that when they have a job opening, if they have a job opening, you can submit that as a portfolio piece. All right, and then that will dramatically increase your chances of getting hired, or at least getting that first interview, which is most important, right? Your first job is to get that interview. And once you get an interview, that's where you can sell yourself further to eventually hopefully get a job. So in terms of junior designers, in terms of helping them through this crisis or in their next career, if they from a junior designer go to mid-level and they want to go for a higher level, then look for that company or that type of project they want to do, and then do it and use it as your portfolio piece to kind of share and spread the word.
Yeah, I mean that's very good advice. I mean, even as a lecturer, I'm sure you would have seen a lot of portfolios of students who want to come to your school as well, right, in the past. Then you see, how come you're showing me the same work and someone else is also showing the same work? So I think definitely, doing some work that relates. I mean, if a student came in and their portfolio was like, oh, I just redesigned your SIT logo, I'll be like, oh, okay, you definitely stand out in my eye, because I think technical skills, they can groom, but I think what you're talking about here also is also about initiative, right? Which I think is
intention.
Yeah. So I think that's a very good point. So yeah, I guess so we'll end off now. But I think thanks everybody, for listening. But really, thank you to Joseph for spending his evening with me and recording this. But yeah, whenever whoever is listening, and if you do want to connect with Joseph, I do have his details in the links in the descriptions. So thank you very much, Joseph, for your time. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, Nicholas, for inviting me. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
And we'll see you at the next podcast. And yeah, have a good day or a good night wherever you are, and have a good week ahead, or have a good end of the week whenever you're listening to this. So take care and goodbye. See you. Thanks, Joseph. Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.